This video is brought to you by the 3 Minute Board Game patrons. Keep us independent by supporting us on Patreon.
Kia ora koutou, and welcome to the slightly clickbaity titled video reviewing the board game that broke 3 Minute Board Games. Now, what do I mean by it broke 3 Minute Board Games? Well, we've been able to do something quite special on the channel over these last 6 years or so. And that is practically every game that's come across my table I've been able to put into the 3 minute format. Now, whether you think that format is worthy or successful or not, that's up to you. But for me, it's been working pretty well for most games. And I've been able to get complex games like Twilight Imperium, like Australia, and like Eclipse Second Dawn into the format. Now, I don't get all the details of the game into my reviews, but that's not the purpose of them. Sometimes I have to gloss over things or speed past stuff or not look at some subsystems. But as long as I'm communicating the overall vibe, the overall experience of a game, and giving people just enough so they can make an informed decision on whether to look further or whether this is not their thing at all, I feel like I've done my job. What I can't do is a 3 minute review for the following game. This is sped up 40 times, by the way, just FYI. Cool, and it's done. And that looked like that was a lot of setup, but it already mostly set up the game. That was just the finishing touches. All the player boards had to be set up first. So yeah, here it is, Europa Universalis, the game that broke 3 minute board games. It's all set up and ready to go for a 6-player game. Now, I have a positively huge table, and this is taking up all the space. Like, a 6-player game, we almost feel like we need a little side table or something to put the objectives and some of the cards and stuff on, because there is not a lot of real estate here. You're certainly not going to be able to put any drinks, and you have to get very cozy with the people alongside you. Now, I'm still going to aim to keep this video relatively short, so I'm not going to cover every system in the game. I'm not going to dive into every single rule this game has, because we'd be here for an hour or so. What I am going to zoom in on is some of the mechanical highlights of the game and tell you a story about why I think it's a very special game for a very distinct audience. This is not a game for everyone. This is not a game you can just set up and go, hey, who wants a friendly round of Europa Universalis? But for the people that this game is designed for its audience, it is something special. So anyway, moving on to the basic board that's in front of us. And as I said, this is set up for 6 players and it's a 1444 scenario. So that means it's starting in the year 1444. And our 6 players are the Ottoman Empire, Poland, Commonwealth, Austria, who is the Holy Roman Empire at the time, France, England, and Castile, because we do not have a united Spain at this point. We've also got some non-player empires in the game, and they are the Mamluks, Portugal, and Denmark. Now, a lot of Europa Universalis is card driven. That means there are several decks of cards in this game, and they have massive impacts on what you do each turn. There's a giant stack of event cards for this game, and this is actually the stack selected for this particular scenario. So they're not entirely random. If you're playing a game where Russia, for example, or Muscovy is one of the active players, then there'll be more events focused around them being an active player. And what you do is you'll get a number for each turn equal to the number of players plus 1, and you reveal 3 of them at a time. And I use a handy little stand from Nemesis to make sure that the players on the board can see what these are. So there'll be 3 revealed sitting there for people to see, but here's one for you to take a look at. Now, the deal with each of these events is they have a lot of information on them. That one, Iberian Wedding. Yeah, it'll tell you all the stuff that's happening on the card. We won't go into those details, but there's also a ruler at the bottom. So this is how ruler, and in this case that's Isabel of Spain, would come into play, because it's marked with a with the Spanish symbol. So as you progress through the game, your leaders will die out or get old or get sick and infirm, and you'll have stronger kings and queens and weaker kings and queens. And that's how the event card system does this. Now, most of the events are pretty horrible, to be honest. They introduce plagues, they introduce breakups and kingdoms falling to pieces and civil unrife and discord. But everyone has to pick one event through their cycle of turns for a full round. So you'll go through and you'll play a bunch of turns, and one of those turns has to be an event turn. So you have to pick an event. So timing that, so pick a discord ones so you can spread the disease somewhere else, or is a really big part of the game, is picking those events. And there's so much history in these, and they go all the way through till the Napoleonic Wars with some of these events down here. Like, yeah, we've got here in the 4th era, which is part of the expansion. This one here is the voyages of James Cook, who was the English captain that circumnavigated, was the first European to circumnavigate Aotearoa. So, big chunks of history in this game. And I love that the events suck for the most part, because it makes it an anxious thing to do. It's about risk mitigation rather than doing something amazing and decisive. Very much like Twilight Struggle, where you've got an event that might be your opponent's and you're trying to mitigate the damage a lot of the time. Sometimes you do want to pick the event because it's like, oh, this is actually really good for my empire, but I think most of the time that is not the case. Now, after that, you get to pick 3 development cards. So that's after you've seen the 3 events that are on display. Each player gets to pick 3 development cards from the diplomacy, trade, and military decks. And these are special action cards. So, for example, the diplomacy one allows you to set up a spy network. The military one is naval maneuvers, and the trade one is setting up, not trade, knowledge one is setting up, what's it, knowledge? Administration, always forget. The administration one is setting up a central authority. So these cards all cost you money to keep. So you won't be able to keep all of them every turn if you want to have a functioning economy, but they give you special actions. And there's, I think, 9 different types of special action in each stack. And this is where a lot of flavorful actions are included. So you can do a bunch of normal actions through your turn, but some of the flavorful ones, like appointing someone to the papal curia, so that's to influence the Pope. You can only do that if you pick up the right card from one of these stacks, and I think it's in the diplomacy stack. These stacks also come with leaders, so you got leaders like this guy here, and they can improve your faction's abilities. So you can hire leaders, and they are also a drain on the economy. So you can take the card, you can play it for its effect, or you can promote the leader and put them under the board. Gives you lots of options. There's lots of options in these cards. And the third type of card are mission cards. And mission cards are these small ones that are faction specific. So each of them has a to-do list on it. And once you do that, you get the victory points on them, and then you can move on to the next stage of mission. And this keeps the game focused. So instead of a lot of 4X type games, where really you're just out there to get the most stuff and accumulate more things, and at the end of the game, the person who got the most things wins, these are very targeted missions. So for example, France, at the start of the game, their missions could likely be get the English presence, because England starts with some presence in France, get that all out of France. That could be one of their goals. So it has them very focused on doing specific things that are historic. But you do have a choice of which missions to take. So you're not 100% railroaded. There'll be 3 missions available, and you get to choose 2 of them. And you can do other things as well, but these missions are a nice, clean way to focus yourself and give you some victory points on the way. And the game is won ultimately by having the most prestige, which is the victory point system in that. And completing missions is a big way of doing that. So in addition to the cards I previously described, there are 2 other sets of cards that will influence you. One are the milestones. So for each age, there are a set of milestones that are available for each player. And these are goals to accomplish. This one here is to to place a colony in one of the colony boards over there. So that's, landing in the Americas. First player to get that gets 5 prestige points, which is a big deal. And the second one is these ideas over here. And ideas are sort of a technology tree in the game. So this one here, it's a military one, are cannons. And you have to spend a lot of resources to unlock these ideas, but they represent like technologies that you'll have from that point on in the game, and they can give you an edge and an advantage. So it is a big decision point whether you do spend the resources to get in on these ideas or when you spend those resources. You definitely want to get some advantages throughout the game, but yeah, a really good example is in order to get that other achievement where you unlock a colony, you need to have researched this first, which allows you to do that colonization action. So a lot of them will give you an advantage, and some of them will open up gameplay opportunities that didn't exist before. Now, for a lot of the game, you'll be focused on your player board, which is this thing here. That gives you a lot of information and tracks your kingdom through the course of the game. These top tracks here, these little ones, represent small towns that you control. And these ones here are big towns or cities you control. Now, the more stuff you have on the board, the more income you generate each turn, and the more troops you have in your reserve. So the larger your empire is in that regard, the more stuff you'll be able to deploy. And these ones here represent vassals, so people you've made submit to you. That means one of the cool things about this layout is you can tally up exactly how well you're doing in terms of economy just by looking at your board. So this dashboard shows your economy really, really well, but also has these 3 boxes here, which are for administrative, diplomatic, and military power, respectively. And that's represented by cubes. And these cubes are what you actually spend to do actions. If you have no cubes left, you can't take actions in this game. And every action you take requires you to spend from one of these 3 pools. And here's where those leaders I mentioned before make a difference. Because if you pop this leader here, who's got +2 administrative power, you slide him under here, then at the start of your turn, you are getting in that particular category another 2 administrative power. So that gives you a lot more actions to do. That guy's costing you 2 money a turn, and you're going to have to pay for that out of your tax base. But here's part of the big juggling thing. You can't afford to hire all the best people. And also, every person you hire, there's the opportunity cost. That's one of the 3 cards you drew that you're just not going to be able to play for that effect. And these people also die of old age, so you can't keep them the whole game. So there's a lot of decision points on how to use your cards to the best ability because it's got so many different effects. So let's have a look at some of the basic things you can do with administrative, diplomatic, and military power. The obvious one is to play these cards. Well, you see they've got a cost associated with them, so you have to spend that amount of power to get that card down. Then this one has a specific number of uses that you'll mark off, and once that's had its uses, it's done. Administration actions include increasing the stability of your kingdom, colonizing territories, and converting people to your religion. Diplomatic actions include placing influence on the board, which I'll cover off shortly, forging alliances, trading, and fabricating claims, all of which are very, very, very important in advancing the game. And the military actions include recruiting, marching your troops, and declaring war. So one of the things I really like about this game is you cannot just go to war. Well, you can, but it causes massive stability damage, and it's a really dumb thing to do. What you need to do is spend some diplomacy to fabricate claims. So here, France places a claim on Lombardy. Now, Lombardy is jam-packed full of different factions, including Milan. But placing a claim here gives me cause for war against every single one of them. However, as France, we already have existing claims here, so choose not to do that. Our diplomatic efforts would be best spent improving our relationship with Provence in order to try to bring them into France proper. We do, however, have claims against the English in Aquitaine, and then choose to declare war on the English in Bordeaux. Now, declare war and activate units are separate actions, so this does give the English time to respond. And they can send a force into battle. I'm not going to cover the full combat rules here, or the war rules, because they are pages and pages of stuff. What I will stress is that most wars in this game are small wars. They'll be fought over a couple of objectives, and things will change hands. There's very rarely the wars of extermination you see in other 4X games. As a side note, I do like that you have armies that you keep off the board and you only put one figure on the board. And you track all the extra troops and stuff off here. It just makes the board a lot less cluttered, especially seeing you've already got all these control markers on the board. And this was filled with, 50 pieces as well. It'd be an absolute nightmare. So that was an excellent decision to keep those off the board. Another really cool part of this game is how it incorporates religion. So, the start of the game, most of the factions are Catholic, except for the Ottomans and a few of the others who are Muslim. But the Reformation happens during the game, or can do. So you can end up with nations becoming Protestant. And Protestantism and Islam are sort of active religions in this game, so they spread through the game. But then Catholicism can upgrade to a counter-Reformation where it becomes a spreading religion as well. And it's a fascinating extra layer, because expanding your empire, expanding your kingdom into territories that do not align with your faith is hard work. So you have to have this extra layer of trying to convert regions as well, or convert regions and then conquer them, or conquer them then convert them, depending on which way you want to go about doing it. But it's just that extra level of nuance you don't see in a lot of other 4X games, where you just, pile your ships in and, oh look, I control this thing, I control it 100% effectively. All the way through Europa Universalis, if you take a place, you don't get to control it until you bring it into your kingdom. You don't get to control it properly. If it's got a different faith than you, it's going to be more rebellious. And every place has a sort of default setting on it. So places will potentially revolt and go back to their original owners. And that's something I really like. A lot of games like this, everything is always more, big, until the board is completely full, and that's when you start getting your crash points. In Europa Universalis, because there's that much work involved in adding stuff to your empire, you really want to do stuff that follows missions, that gets you goals. You don't just want to get drawn into long, drawn-out, pointless conflicts. And you don't just want to go, oh, I'm going to capture your capital because that means you can't win the game anymore. There's so much effort involved in taking out another player in this game that I can't imagine it ever really being worth it. And that's cool. That means you can play this sort of big, epic game without worrying that 2 hours in, because you've made a wrong step, the person next to you is going to steamroll you, and you're going to spend 8 hours just sitting there going, well, I guess I'm filling up the numbers. Which is not a lot of fun for anyone. It's worth noting that the game is quite soloable if you have the time and energy. We've got the Mamluks here set up as an AI faction, and they have a whole bunch of special rules. So here's like the targeting rules for the Mamluks when they are being run by the bot. Lots to do. Quite complex. If you're into this sort of thing, you'll absolutely love this part of the game. As I said earlier, I'm barely going to touch the basics of this game while reviewing it, just because there's so many subsystems, there's so many little bits and pieces here. I've blasted through a chunk of it, probably too quickly, and I didn't really stay on any system for any length of time. I didn't talk about how cool it is to play the Holy Roman Empire with its own sort of unique mechanics. I had a really good time playing Austria in one of the games I played. But that brings me to who this game is for. Are you a history buff? Can you spare a weekend or so every now and then to play this game? Do you have a group of 4 or 5 or 6 other people who will play that game with you, who are also history buffs and also have that time? If you do, oh wow, have I got a game for you. Europa Universalis. All the fun and the experiences I used to have with Civilization 20 years ago or more, the original Civilization game, I get that in Europa, but more so. It's like the original Civilization experience dialed up to not 11 but 13. It's taken through the roof. This is an amazing, epic, grandiose game that can only be played by a handful of people. There is the rules burden to overcome. The rulebook is real hard work. I am a professional reader of rules, and I still had to check things, even doing this video after a couple of games. I had to check things on my way through. When we played it the first time, the first turn took, I believe, 2.5 or 3 hours. But the fourth or fifth turn, I think fifth turn, took 45 minutes. The game can go apace once everyone knows what they're doing. But I had a group of that time of experienced wargamers, people who've played things like Here I Stand and other GMT type games or big serious games. These were people who knew what they were getting into and did pre-reading. And it still took us nearly 3 hours for that first turn. But that's the sort of group it's for. People who are into war games, people who have the time and the energy to commit to something quite this big. Because it is an experience. It's a rewarding experience. But it is not a game you can play once. It is not a game you go, I've seen everything this game has to offer after an afternoon playing with it, and I never need to see anything more. There's so much to explore within this game. And I really want to give it a hell of a lot more tries. My problem is, of course, the time when you have a toddler to get a group together, but I am trying to get another group together to have another go at this later on, because I think the game is worth the time and effort. Now, I said a while back that Twilight Imperium 4 dropped out of favor with me because I spent 13 hours playing the game last time, and I didn't really have a lot of fun doing it. I think I said the game crammed 2 hours of fun into 13 hours. Europa Universalis, we got to nearly the end of the second age, but we had to finish up last time, and I just wanted to keep playing, but that was all the time we had allocated. I wanted more, and that's a great sign. So I am a massive history nerd. In case you're unaware, I did politics and history at university through to a master's level. And this is my jam, but it probably won't be your jam. And that's fine. This is a game for such a small niche. But if what I've said is striking a chord with you, and it sounds like it is your sort of game, absolutely give it a go. And this is the game that broke 3-minute board games. I cannot begin to cover this one in 3 minutes, and I've got no idea how long I've rambled for. I've tried to keep it succinct, but there you have it. Europa Universalis, a gold medal game with a huge number of caveats attached to that. And if you enjoyed this video, hit the notification button, like, share, and subscribe to the channel.